Welcome back to the Anti-Meta Meta Club. This week's race C is Group 3 at Brands Hatch, and the M6 is absolutely dominant. Let's get into it. Despite the fact that the class is actually pretty well balanced right now, the M6 is good in every single category. The only way I think the Aston Martin really edges it out is under braking power and traction exiting corners, which means that you can really go for some deep passes and also still be able to accelerate even if you have a really weird line. It's been a while since we've seen this kind of dominance in the leaderboards for the Group 3 class. I believe it's 81 M6s in the top 100. Drifter got a really good time in the V12. I believe Breezy Wind got one around that time as well. I managed to get a 21.9, putting me in 80th, and as you can see, there's just M6s everywhere. This tune is a modification of a tune that I got while I was streaming. I actually can't remember who originally made the tune, so I'm sorry I can't give any credit, but I did change a number of things. I like to use default ABS and +5 brake balance on this tune. As you're entering the first braking zone, be careful that you're not too close to the grass because it does curve a little bit and you could accidentally dip a tire in the grass. You do not want that. Brake about halfway between these two white markers on the side of the track. We're going to immediately start trail braking. You do not want to be at 100% brake for even a brief moment going into this corner. You've got to immediately try to tuck your nose into and hit this apex, and it's going to apex right before this little crest. Too early on the apex or the throttle can cause you to go directly off the track because you do apex right before that crest. Use all the runoff, but be careful if your right tires go up on the curb, it can make you slide. Make your way back on the track, and right at the beginning of the grass, we're going to look on the wall. Right before this red mark on the barrier is when you want to hit the brakes. Rather than trying to late apex this or even double apex this, I learned from my good friend Road Beef, the best thing to do is dive for that apex, make it a very long apex, and then try to gently get on the throttle as early as you can. I actually completely missed the first apex, made it a little bit of a late apex, but I was close enough to it that I didn't lose a lot of speed. The best thing you can do is just stay as close to that inside corner as you can. Setting up for this next braking zone can be really tricky. I want you to pay attention to the fact that I lifted off the throttle before I touched the brakes to make sure that my car started to align with the curb before hitting the brakes. Brake very heavily at the beginning of that, making sure you don't dip your tires past the curbing whatsoever, and as you turn in, I do want you to dip down to second just briefly, though you can stay in third. It's much more difficult. The optimal way to take the exit is so your left tires are still touching the curb and kind of getting caught on the curb. When you go past it, you risk going into the grass and the dirt, which can slow you down, but it doesn't take that much momentum as long as you had a lot to begin with. At the end of this brown strip here on the right, we want to start hitting the brakes, but we're going to make sure you don't use full brakes because you should already be turning in just a little bit. If you go 100% braking, you're probably just going to get some understeer, and that's going to really slow you down in this corner. Dip down to second gear, get as close to the apex as you can. If you do go up on it, be very careful as you get back on the throttle, and you want to apex right after that white line that intersects the road. Second gear and third gear both work. I do believe third gear is better and it's also safer. I'll take this chance to mention that you shouldn't rev this thing out too much, just a few of the blinks on the digital tach should be fine. Looking at the right side of the track, you can see a red and then green part of the barrier right here, and when you get all the way past that is when you're going to hit the brakes and drop down to fourth gear. Be patient as you trail brake into this corner. A lot of people get off the brakes too early and they start understeering. You want to make sure that you hit this apex and then get fully back on the throttle, making sure, of course, that you don't go off track here. Leading up to the next braking zone, we're once again going to look at the barrier, and the red spot on the barrier is where you want to hit the brakes. Now, this one is really tricky. You got to make sure you don't take too much of the inside curb, but you have to take some of it. If you put your left tires so they hit the curb right here, it's going to bounce you off the track. So make sure you use as much of that curb as you can without getting your left tires on the curb at all. Until, of course, you exit, then you have to use all of the exit curb. From here, we want to stay as far left as we can. We don't want to touch the grass whatsoever, so be very wary of where you position your car. And right before this final white marker on the right is when you're going to hit the brakes. Brake heavily very briefly and then take as much of the inside corner as you can, trying to stay as fast as you can in third gear and of course get back on that throttle as early as you can. It's going to feel very sketchy when you nail it right. You've got to carry as much speed as you possibly can over this and get on that throttle as well. It's going to feel like you're going to go all the way into the grass, but even if you touch the grass just a little bit, as long as you straighten your wheel, you're going to be okay. You should avoid it though. Once again, right before this final white marker, we're going to hit the brakes down to third gear, and your goal is to carry as much speed as you can, putting two tires on this curb and then get on that throttle as heavily and as early as you can. If you do it just right, you'll go all the way up on this exit curbing and you'll stay on that throttle, not shifting to fifth gear, staying in fourth gear before the final corner. One final time before this last white marker here on the left, we're going to hit the brakes, downshift to third, and you're going to be very, very careful on this. You're going to hit the apex like you would, but again, you can see how this crest kind of dips directly after where you hit the apex, so you got to be very patient and very gentle when you get on the throttle. You can see where this kind of runoff area is from people running off, of course. You can use that, but if you go anywhere beyond it, you're going to go way off track. This first corner is incredibly difficult. You're going to feel like you're right on the edge. It's really important to be very patient on the brakes for, I mean, pretty much every corner, but there's very important. If you make any mistake whatsoever on the brakes, you're probably going to go all the way off the track. I came off this inside curb just a little bit. If you actually touch the curb the entire time, make this the shortest line possible, you're probably going to end up a lot faster. I've gone a little bit faster than that before. Going a little bit too deep in this corner is probably better than going in too early. But if you understeer on braking, it's going to cost you a lot of momentum. So whatever you can, do whatever you can to not understeer, not brake too hard. You got to be just very, very gentle on the brakes, but of course still scrub off enough speed. On this fast right-hander, a lot of people just come off the brakes too early. You got to make sure you don't scrub off too much speed, but of course you have to stay on the brakes long enough to hit the apex. This corner is similar, but with the addition of this inside curb, it makes it really, really treacherous. So if you take too much curb or not enough curb, you're probably going to go all the way off to the left. Most people either go way too fast and go off, or they go too slow and cause accidents behind them, so be very wary of people who are going to brake a lot more than you. Give them extra space going into that corner when you start feeling really confident with it. Just like the first corner, the final corner is really tricky because the road kind of crests and dips down directly after where you apex, so you've got to make sure that you get on that throttle really gently or even delay getting on the throttle to make sure that you don't just understeer off the track. As some of you may or may not know, our friend Road Beef was actually here with me the entire week, and because I was focused on hanging out with him because he lives an entire state away, I may or may not have prioritized spending time with him over making this video. I apologize, but on top of that, it was also actually pretty tough for me to set a lap, so if I were just a little bit faster, this video would have come out faster. But I digress. Since it took me so long, this video is actually from earlier today. I did get a pretty good race, the second race I did this week, but this one ended up actually being a little bit better. The very first time I did this race, I did not take tires, and it did actually end up going pretty well. This race I did want to take tires just to see what kind of difference I could make. And again, it turned out pretty well, but you'll see. What's pretty interesting about this race is that the pit stop is required, tires aren't, but since the pit's really short, it actually becomes viable to take tires with a lot of the cars, and some cars definitely can't actually make it without taking tires, so if you have the right car, you've got options. If you got the wrong car, you don't. One of the big reasons I like the Aston is that you do have the option of taking tires or not, and you're still going to be fine as long as you're aware of what you need to do. The two main things that cause tire wear are sliding or using too much steering angle. And when you're in dirty air, you pretty much have to use more steering angle than you usually would because you've got that aero wash, and so that ends up causing a lot of tire wear as well. If you find yourself in a bad place at the end of lap 1, then you might want to risk trying to go in the pits, not take any tires, and then just use all of the beautiful clean air that you've got to just get a really good second stint in. If you have fast people in front of you, or if you already have clean air, then it's probably worth it waiting somewhere towards the middle to then take your pit and take tires. If you are going to take tires, you still have a number of options because, like I always say, we don't just want to pit at one specific predetermined lap. We want to think of a pit window so we can still be flexible with our options. The fact of the matter is, if you can do this race without taking tires, then any time that you can take tires and not lose too much time is going to be a bonus. If you're trying to have the very best race you possibly can, I would suggest pitting anywhere between lap 5 and lap 8. Absolutely anything before or after that could still be done, but you're probably going to risk having a slower stint, a slower, longer stint, because your tires are going to be a little bit older and they're not going to be quite as good. The ultimate goal of any kind of pit stop strategy is going to be clean air, just completely free air. So if you see a lot of people pitting directly in front of you, it would be best to avoid them if you can do so and not slide out or crash because of how bad your tires are. Speaking of sliding out and crashing, a lot of that is going to happen. This has been a truly dirty week. I think a lot of it has to do with people being clumsy and the track being pretty narrow on top of being completely surrounded by grass. So if you go off the track, you're probably going to spin around or hit something. So be very careful. Be very wary and aware of where people are. One thing you want to be wary of I just mentioned all the accidents, but one thing you want to be wary of is anytime you see people battling a lot, and especially if there's a third car, you can probably assume something crazy is going to happen, and there's no real key to avoiding accidents like that, but one thing you should probably focus on is staying to the inside of the track if you see people going crazy in front of you. What's usually going to happen is, especially with a corner, people are just going to go with the momentum when they lose control of their car, so they're just going to fly off the track, and if you're on the outside of them, you're going to be taken with them. So if you see people being really crazy, just get to the inside of the track, be ready to brake, and don't worry about losing your momentum or losing a position. It's much better to lose a position or lose your momentum than it is to be completely taken out and pushed off track. If you do end up in a wild situation, you've got to be wary of what damage can do to your car. The damage just went away. It heals itself after, I believe, 30 seconds. But when you do have the damage, not only does it slow you down, it slows down your cornering, it slows down your top speed, it slows down your acceleration. But even beyond that, it also eats up your tires more than normal. If you're ending up with a lot more tire wear than you're used to, it might be because you're taking damage. Of course, there's lots of stuff, as we've talked about, that can cause tire wear, but damage actually affects it much, much worse. And you can see from the fact that the left tires are much more damaged than the rest of the tires right now, and we're only on lap 3. Now, one thing to talk about is how the Aston can fare directly head-to-head against an M6. Now, this guy is not quite a top split driver. He's not like a top split GTWS driver, but he's in top split dailies. So obviously he knows at least a little bit of what he's doing. And as you can see, it was not too difficult to outbrake and then even pass on the outside because of the incredible cornering and braking capabilities of the Aston. And of course, big shout out to that guy for just giving me space in general. After nearly 4 full laps with nothing but luck, almost nothing but luck, we found ourselves already in 4th place, and being behind this Murillo speeder, I've actually seen him punt a lot of people recently, including myself, so I figured instead of fighting that guy, potentially getting punted, potentially having to punt him, we just go into the pits. Even though it's really early, we're only at the end of lap 4, taking tires on lap 4 is infinitely better than not taking tires on any other lap. So we decided to go in, take the tires, and we came out all the way back 12th place. Now, it's definitely not optimal being in traffic right now, but the one person who's directly in front of us is a GTWS top split driver, and so I figured that he was going to be at the very least fast enough to not really slow us down and wear our tires out. On top of that, I do believe the people directly in front of him were also people who started towards the front and pit really early, so they are most likely going to be fast enough that they won't cause any problems for us. They'll probably be going as fast or almost as fast as us, and then when we do pass them, since they have good enough pace, it probably won't take that much from us. Now, I'm not sure what's happening with Collapse at a pace, but I decided since he's making so many mistakes that I was just going to go for a pass. Now, it's really unlikely to pass another GTWS top split driver on the outside, regardless of what cars we have, but he's in the meta car as well, so I figured I would just slot in behind him and once again give him the opportunity just to set the pace and kind of just sit in his draft and not really have to worry about any drama. Now, we're just jumping ahead a little bit to show that I definitely did get all the way in front of Murillo's Speed BR, and it was a very good thing. He was very aggressive. As you can see, he's posturing up like he's going to go for a pass. I dove in the inside, cut early, and he drove directly into me. Not only that, he pushed me all the way out to the outside. I decided to continue defending, and I was able to stay all the way in front of him. Like I said before, he was extremely aggressive. He was punting people. He did punt me at one point, and so it feels very good to get all the way in front of him. And as long as I can stick with Collapse at a pace, I'm really not going to have to worry about him at all for the rest of the race. Now, since I was able to get in the pits so cleanly, so early after getting so far up in the field really early on, I found myself in 3rd place with absolutely no traffic very, very easily. And the very first time I actually ended up seeing anyone anywhere near me was when Mateo Estevez, also known as Hypers, started to catch me. Now, this is terrifying because he is one of the world champions in the GTR manufacturers team. He is an incredibly, incredibly fast driver. His fastest lap at the time was barely faster than my fastest lap, and I was purple right now, but despite all of that, he was catching hand over fist. Fast forwarding all the way to the final lap, you can see that he got himself a 22.3, and I did not improve on my fastest lap whatsoever. He was right on my tail, and so it was going to take everything I could possibly do to not let him pass me. If you look at my tires, you can see that despite the fact that they're 8 or 9 laps old, I had a lot of tire life left in me. But despite the fact that there is a lot of tire life, that doesn't mean that we're going to have really good pace still. The car is going to act different each lap. The fuel load is going to change. The tires are going to go through different heat cycles in this game. It's wild. But we still had tire life, so we were able to stay just barely in front. I was really hoping to get close enough to Tech so I could get his slipstream, but of course if I got too close, then I get his dirty air, and that might be an opportunity for Hypers then to pass me. In the end, it was a combination of luck and my driving abilities. In reality, in a 1 versus 1, he would take me absolutely every single time, but because I had a little bit more luck in the race and because the lag brought him so close that he actually hit me right there, I know that wasn't his fault whatsoever. It did push him far enough back that on the final corner I could take a normal line and there was just pretty much nothing he could do to get in front. He did get close. As you can see, he was creeping closer, but if he had one more lap, I think he would have taken me. But since he didn't, I was able to lock down a podium from all the way in the back. Thank you very much for watching my video. If you liked what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, we're going to leave you with a look at my current members. Massive shout out to all y'all. I love every single one of you. Thank you.